History is a funny thing. We often imagine it as a fixed, linear progression. One event inevitably leads to the next, like dominoes tumbling in a row. But what if we could reach back and pluck one of those dominoes away? What if a single change could rewrite the entire course of history? That's the intriguing question posed by alternate history. Today, we'll explore one such what if. What if World War I never happened? Imagine Europe in the early 20th century. Tensions are high, yes, but the spark that lit the fuse of war never ignites. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo, that seemingly minor event that triggered a global conflict, never occurs. Without the war to end all wars, the world embarks on a vastly different trajectory. This isn't just an academic exercise, it's a way to understand the profound impact of World War I, a conflict that reshaped the world map, ushered in new ideologies, and sowed the seeds for future conflicts. By imagining a world without it, we can better grasp the magnitude of its legacy. Join me as we venture down this alternate timeline, exploring what might have been. The most immediate and visible difference in a world without World War I would be the map. The borders that we are familiar with today would look drastically different, as the war was a major catalyst for redrawing national boundaries. The war redrew national boundaries, shattered empires, and gave birth to new nations. It was a seismic event that reshaped the political landscape of Europe and beyond. Without it, the old order would have likely endured at least for a while longer. Monarchies and empires that seemed eternal might have continued to dominate the continent. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, that sprawling multi-ethnic entity, wouldn't have fractured into a patchwork of smaller states. Its complex web of nationalities and cultures might have continued to coexist under a single imperial banner. It might have continued grappling with internal divisions, but the war's utter devastation wouldn't have accelerated its demise. The empire could have sought gradual reforms to address its internal challenges. Similarly, the Ottoman Empire, often referred to as the sick man of Europe, might have clung to life for decades more. Its vast territories and diverse populations would have remained under Ottoman control. This continued existence of empires would have had profound implications. The balance of power in Europe would have been very different, with these old powers still holding significant influence. The geopolitical landscape of Europe would have remained dominated by these aging giants, potentially stifling the ambitions of smaller nations and delaying the rise of new powers. The political dynamics would have been more conservative, with less room for revolutionary change. The ethnic and nationalist tensions that fueled the war wouldn't have magically vanished. These tensions would have continued to simmer, creating a volatile undercurrent in European politics. They might have simmered beneath the surface, threatening to boil over in different ways. Nationalist movements could have sought other means to achieve their goals, potentially leading to localized conflicts. However, without the war to sap their strength, these empires might have found ways to adapt and reform. Political reforms and concessions could have been made to placate restive populations. Perhaps a more gradual transition of power could have occurred, avoiding the chaos and bloodshed that marked the 20th century. The process of change might have been slower, but potentially less destructive. Or perhaps the pressures of modernity would have eventually proved too much, leading to a different kind of upheaval. The industrial and social changes of the early 20th century were immense, and their impact would have been felt regardless of the war. World War I was a crucible of innovation, a period where necessity truly became the mother of invention. The demands of the conflict spurred rapid advancements in technology, pushing the boundaries of what was thought possible, particularly in aviation, weaponry, and communication. Airplanes evolved from rudimentary machines to sophisticated tools of war, while communication devices like telegraphs and radios became indispensable. Without the war's insatiable appetite for new tools of destruction, technological development might have followed a different trajectory, one less focused on conflict and more on human advancement. Instead of focusing on tanks and poison gas, scientists and engineers might have dedicated their energies to other fields such as healthcare, transportation, and sustainable energy solutions. Perhaps the world would have seen earlier breakthroughs in medicine, transportation, or renewable energy, potentially altering the course of history in profound ways. The economic impact of the war, which devastated economies and drained national treasuries, would also be absent, allowing for a more stable and prosperous global economy. Without the crippling debts and reparations that followed the war, nations might have been free to invest more heavily in social programs, infrastructure, or scientific research, fostering a more equitable and advanced society. The global economic order, shaped by the war's victors, would have been different, potentially leading to a more balanced and cooperative international landscape. Without the Treaty of Versailles, which imposed harsh penalties on Germany and contributed to the rise of extremist ideologies, the economic landscape of the 1920s and 30s might have been far more stable, possibly preventing future conflicts. However, this isn't to say that the world would have been a utopia. Challenges and rivalries would still exist, shaping the course of nations. Economic competition between nations would have continued, potentially leading to different kinds of conflicts, whether over resources, trade routes, or political influence. The absence of the war's technological leaps might have left the world ill-equipped to face other challenges, such as pandemics or natural disasters, highlighting the complex interplay between conflict and progress. One of the most profound social impacts of World War I was its effect on women's rights. The war acted as a catalyst, pushing women into roles and responsibilities that were previously deemed unsuitable for them. With men away fighting, women entered the workforce in unprecedented numbers, taking on roles traditionally reserved for men. This shift was not just a temporary measure, but a significant step towards gender equality. This wartime experience challenged traditional gender roles and fueled the growing movement for women's suffrage. Women proved their capability and resilience, which bolstered their demands for equal rights. Without the war, this social transformation might have unfolded differently, more gradually perhaps, but not necessarily less significantly. The momentum for change was already building, driven by the tireless efforts of early feminists. The pre-war period was already a time of great social ferment, with women increasingly demanding greater rights and opportunities. Activists were organizing, educating, and mobilizing women across the country. The fight for suffrage, already gaining momentum before the war, might have continued through different means: political lobbying, public demonstrations, and cultural shifts. These efforts were laying the groundwork for future victories. While the war certainly accelerated the pace of change, it's plausible that women would have achieved equal rights in the political, economic, and social spheres even without it. The determination and resolve of these early activists were undeniable. In fact, without the war's devastating impact on a generation of men and the social upheaval it caused, the path to gender equality might have been smoother, less fraught with resistance and backlash. The societal shifts might have been more organic and less contentious. A world untouched by the horrors of war might have been more receptive to calls for social justice and equality across the board, not just for women, but for other marginalized groups as well. The collective push for a fairer society could have gained broader support. The absence of war might have allowed for a more inclusive and progressive social landscape, where the voices of all those seeking equality could be heard and acted upon. The fight for equality in all its forms was an ongoing struggle, and the absence of war might have provided a more stable and supportive environment for these crucial social changes to take root and flourish.